Hi friends, we're here with another Foundations video where we're going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of getting a great guitar sound, and that is our amp. Our core guitar tone comes from how our guitar and our amp interact with each other, and so we want to do all that we can to get them working together well from the start. And we're going to do this without any effects. And the reason we want to do that is because when we add those effects back in later with a great bass tone, they're not going to have to work as hard to achieve the desired effect that we want. And also, they're going to add less noise to our signal overall, and that's always a really good thing. And second, we want to make sure that we're sending our audio engineer the best possible sound from the start that we possibly can, because if they're spending a ton of time EQing out a bunch of harsh frequencies and trying to fix your tone, you're not going to sound good in the end, and you're not going to feel very comfortable playing because you're not going to sound like you. And so, three big topics that we're going to dive into today in this video are volume and gain control, EQ and tone control, and then mic placement and how that affects our amp sound. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is our volume and gain control. And when we're talking about this in our modern worship context, we're usually going to be talking about a tube amp or a simulation of a tube amp. And the reason that we're going to talk about this and use these quite frequently is that they have a natural overdrive when their volume is pushed. And that overdrive in response to our playing provides a whole nother dimension to the overall output of the amp. It really takes it from 2D to 3D almost. And an important thing to remember when setting the volume on a tube amp is that volume typically corresponds to a gain or drive control that you normally find on an overdrive pedal. And then the master volume is actually going to be what's controlling the overall output of the amp itself. And a good starting point for finding a volume setting is the point when it's fairly clean when picking, but breaks up a little bit when you really dig into the guitar. And so I'm going to start with my knobs just pretty close to 12 o'clock and then kind of demonstrate finding a good drive setting with just using the volume and master knobs here. This is probably a little dirty to start off, so I'm going to back off of the volume knob and I'm going to add some master back in. So we're getting closer. That's probably pretty good, actually. I might, well, maybe a little bit more drive, maybe a little less master there, so. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that. You can kind of hear that it's much cleaner when I'm just picking individual notes, and then when I really give it a nice strum, that drive really comes through. And so that's going to help our overdrive pedals in the long run and give us a good bass drive sound. And another thing to think about when setting the volume setting on your amp is that the volume knob on your guitar also acts as a drive control almost at the front of your amp. So as I demonstrate here, when I back off the volume, it's going to clean it up quite a bit. And so if you're having any issues with just your amp and guitar when the volume knob is wide open, think about rolling that off just a little bit. The second thing that we're going to talk about is our EQ and tone control. So those bass, middle, and treble knobs. When I'm EQing my amp, I like to start with those in their neutral positions. So right at 12 o'clock. And something to think about when EQing an amp is that it's always good to cut before boosting certain frequencies. So for example, if I thought that my amp sounded a little too bassy, my instinct might be to reach for my treble knob and to boost that. But in terms of audio and the different frequencies, if I have a lot of bass over here on the low end and I add treble, I still have this low end present. And so I haven't really dealt with the issue. But if I cut my bass, then I'm going to hear my high end a lot more clearly. And if I do have to boost, then I won't have to boost as much. And so I'm going to demonstrate that real quick. So we have our drive sound that we like. And I'm feeling like it's a little too boomy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off probably a little more harshly than I would. And then I'm going to just add back the bass until I like the sound. So that's still a little thin. It's a lot clearer, but I'm still lacking some depth. Getting closer. So that feels pretty good to me. That feels like I have a lot of depth and thickness to that sound, but it's a lot clearer than it was before. And some other things to think about when EQing an amp: if you have a lot of trouble dealing with the harshness of your guitar and amp together, reach for your tone knob and see what that can do to help smooth your sound. If it's wide open, you might have a lot more harshness. And if you roll it off just a little bit, you can really smooth it really nicely. And another thing too, when I'm EQing an amp, I like to turn my amp reverb all the way down, because typically the reverb that I'm gonna be applying with my pedals is gonna be a lot more helpful in the context of our modern worship sound than this amp reverb would. But if, as a last resort, you need something else to smooth your sound overall, you can turn that reverb up just a little bit. The third and final thing that we're going to talk about is our microphone placement. Now, the microphone itself does not change the way that we set up our amp, but it will ultimately affect what our audio engineer receives from us. And so it's really, really important. So a conversation that you and your audio engineer should be having is what the optimal mic location is going to be for your amp. And so I'm just going to play a little bit and demonstrate how different mic placements affect the sound that an audio engineer would receive. So a general rule of thumb is the farther away from the center of the speaker cone that you get, the darker and more bass focused the sound is going to be. So right in the middle, you're going to get more treble, and then farther away is going to be more bass. We're in the middle right now, so we're going to get more high end. So as we move this out towards the edge, you're going to hear a much deeper sound. So I'll do that again. I'll go back to the middle real quick. You're already hearing that high end come back. And so right in the center, you're going to get the most treble from your amp. On the edge, you're going to get the most bass. And right in the middle is kind of the best of both worlds. And so if you desire a little bit of both, that middle position could be really good for you. Because now I still hear a lot of my treble, but I do have a thicker sound from moving it outward as well. So as you approach setting up your amp in the future, you can use these principles to get your core sound right from the start. We hope that this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions at all about this content, please email worship@grace-bible.org. And we'll see you next time.